Welcome to Cinema Gulp. This is John.
And this is Ben.
Today we're going to do a chaser review for Blade Runner.
Indiana Jones hunts down some Terminators in Ridley Scott's 1982 cult classic, Blade Runner. Since its theatrical release, the film has seen many different versions, including this one, the director's cut. This version is crisp, clean, gorgeous, and in keeping with the tone and design for which Scott himself intended. John, what do you think of the director's cut of Blade Runner?
Visually, it's a beautiful movie. There's just so much to admire in this film. From a filmmaking, technical standpoint, I think the set design, the production design in this film for its time was very innovative and original. Yes, there's been lots of films that have borrowed from it at this point, but back in the early 80s, this film really stood out as something new. The concepts in the film, the premise of the film is interesting. I think they put forth some interesting ideas, but as a film following along with just its plot, it can be a little bit plotting at times. So there's kind of a little bit of a love and hate relationship with this film, but I think as a work of beautiful cinema, I think it's one of Ridley Scott's best looking films. I think sound design is great, production design is excellent. It's got a great score by Vangels, I think is the name of the synth band from the early 80s that was able to score this film, and it really works with the style and look of the film.
I find that any movie that takes place in a future from where it's set is always a little clunky as far as how things look and stuff like that. And I think it's funny that this takes place in 2019, which doesn't resemble 2017 now in any way, shape, or form. But give me sex replicants and I'm happy. I don't care. All that other stuff I don't care about. But people sure still love the smoke in 2019, so smoking must have a gradual increase in the next 2 years. The original tagline for this movie was a chilling, bold, mesmerizing, futuristic detective thriller. That was how they kind of advertised it. It's a film noir set in a future from 1982 anyway, and it plays out beautifully like a film noir, and like you said, it's gorgeous to look at. I totally agree. I love the look of this movie. That's what keeps you engaged in this movie, is how cool it looks. The exterior night shots and just everything. Like, you can see the matte paintings, but you can see miniatures and you can see all that kind of stuff. I have a lot of issues with the movie, though I do find it to be a really enjoyable movie. It's a cult classic, is the status is exactly where it should be, but I've got issues with it being such a high concept but not really paying off in the script or the beats that the story ends up taking. I think there's all this potential in that maybe doesn't see itself through in the way it could have. It just sort of devolves into a thriller at the end with just kind of a chase, all shot and amazingly lit. I just think for the plot of this movie, so cool and interesting and high concept, and it just kind of lags a little bit on coming through and showing that as good as it could have. But I think this movie's awesome though,
because they were playing with the noir aspect of this film. That's why it has
more so than the story.
Yeah. I think they wanted the tone and the feel to be there, but it's thin on plot at times. And I guess maybe the other versions of this that add a lot of voiceover may fill in some of those gaps. But from what I hear, people kind of prefer this version, and that the voiceover is kind of hard to listen to because Harrison Ford is just going through the motions and doing this kind of bored performance.
It's an organization I've worked for 20 years called Conservation International.
I do think his performance is a nice contrast from what we had got at that time in his career. We were used to seeing him play Han Solo and Indiana Jones and other characters that he had played, like American Graffiti, where he's very charismatic. And this was a reverse on that. Doesn't say a whole lot in this film. He's tired. He's fed up with dealing with this situation, with these replicants. He's questioning his own reality at times in the film. And I think all that comes through in his performance, but it's in a very kind of noir, hard-boiled cop type of performance. It's supposed to be that kind of run-down character. And so it's a different look at Harrison Ford from what we were used to at the time. Now it's almost like every performance he gives is this kind of tired, labored performance.
Well, now he just really is tired.
Exactly.
I didn't have any problem with his performance. It was more the development of his character. I mean, if he was just a cop, Blade Runner, trying to hunt these things down, and he was tired and he was bleeding a lot every time he got in a fight, because he's kind of a pussy in this movie. Like, he's not. I think a lot of people think that he's this, when you hear the name Blade, oh, he's a Blade Runner, that sounds so cool, and he's got his trench coat and he's got his cool gun. He really only shoots a woman in the back with that gun. That's pretty much all he does with it. And I think he only shoots 2 people, and they're both women in this movie.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right on.
And
with
neither
that.
one of them have a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, when the movie first came out, though, it had a really, really, really high budget for the time. It had a $30 million budget, and it didn't make its money back. So it's clearly a cult classic type of film.
Yeah.
It's just interesting, though. You think about where Ridley Scott was. This was his follow-up from Alien. I think it was 3 years later. I wonder what happened there.
Him coming off of I think that film was a big hit, Alien. I don't remember what the budget versus how much it made, but for its time, that movie I think was a big hit. And then you have Harrison Ford, who's arguably the biggest star in the world at that time, coming off of those 2, Star Wars and Indiana Jones. So the makeup there was for this to be a big hit, and also with the look of it, playing on Alien, playing on things people had seen recently in Star Wars films, and loving that kind of, not a resurgence of sci-fi, but a kind of new awakening in cinema for sci-fi. So I would think this would have been a bigger hit at the time that it came out, but maybe some people went into it expecting it to be a bit more action-packed, which is not at all an action movie.
No, not at all. I don't know how this kind of movie was advertised back in the day. Trailers back in the day just showed a couple of images out of context. You didn't know what was going on. You were selling it on who made it, a couple of visuals, and who's in it.
And that could sell this movie based on the visuals. I mean, it's always made me think of this movie fondly, even if I didn't remember it that clearly because I've only seen it a few times. But just the visual style of this film is something that's never left. This has always been something that kind of set a standard, I think, in cinema.
You know, that's one thing about this movie, and I think it's ballsy. It sells these ideas of like flying cop cars, and there's some beautiful shots of these flying cop cars, but that's literally all these things are used for is visual. Like you see these giant blimps, and you see these giant video billboards with like geisha type people on them, and then you see like the flying cop cars flying through the air, but that's it. Don't expect like some action-packed car chase with these flying cars. And that's kind of ballsy because it probably costs a lot of money to have those cars go up and down. You know, there's a couple of shots where they actually probably had to crane them up, and they're not really used for anything other than visual effect.
One thing we should definitely point out is the cinematography. Every shot in this movie is beautifully lit. It's just like a work of art, every scene that you're looking at. Ridley Scott's atmosphere, that's one thing that right from the beginning of his career and all the way up to even Alien Covenant, there's still some nice atmosphere being used. That's one of my favorite things about Ridley Scott all throughout his career is just how he makes the screen come to life. Like you said, everyone's always smoking in these scenes. You've got these shafts of light coming through, beaming through, fans that are spinning, so you get this cool lighting effect all throughout the movie. It's just such a beautiful film to look at.
This movie blew me away. I haven't seen this movie in so long. I forgot how amazing, because Ridley Scott's been doing gigantic films for a while where the details are just, it's just a visual catastrophe in my opinion. This movie is so damn detailed when Deckard's just walking through an area of town, like the street level stuff, just the way people are dressed and the way people are coming in and out of restaurants, and the way the workers, people that own these little outside food vendors, like everything is so well thought out and perfectly set up that he really sets and builds atmosphere just magnificently in that movie. I mean, there's so much detail in this movie that we both kind of like, wow, when Deckard gets like punched by a replicant and then he goes home and he takes a shot of some clear liquor and just this little tiny bit of blood ends up back in the shot glass, and it's so well lit against that window.
I feel like this movie reminds me sometimes of a film like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it's beautiful to look at, but it's got some of these like long scenes that you're just kind of waiting for them to end. It's got this interesting score that meshes with the imagery. They're different in so many ways, but while watching it, I think from a visual standpoint, it's so beautiful to look at, but there's times where you're just kind of like waiting for the story to move along.
I think there's the costume design in this movie, outside of Sean Young, who looked like she was dressed in a different movie, is creepy. Everyone's dressed really creepy. Even Deckard's dressed kind of creepy. But like Rutger Hauer and Daryl Hannah, they're just totally, they're so well designed as characters.
Rutger Hauer is somewhat the standout.
Totally the standout, yeah.
And even his character, he's kind of the most interesting character. He's held back a lot in the film. You learn more about him towards the end of the film, so the first half or whatever, you don't even see him on screen all that much.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it?
I think it's a visual masterpiece to some degree, but it's lacking a little bit on storytelling. I think it presents interesting ideas, but for the 2 hours that the film takes place, it doesn't have a whole lot going on. I think the noir aspect from a visual standpoint really comes through in the type of characters they're presenting on screen, but I don't think it lives up to what noir films of the past have done with their dialogue or their storytelling. But I love Ridley Scott, big fan of his. 6.5 gulps for me.
Visual masterpiece of Ridley Scott in his heyday when he was full of ideas and full of innovation as far as filmmaking and the way you mix films together. The sound design was beautiful in this movie too. It had so many different types of things going on. It was just as detailed as the visuals. I'm with you character-wise. I just don't care about most of these people. Fuck's his name? Rutger Hauer is the best character because he has the most eccentric, well-written character, but Sean Young's pretty awful in this movie. I think maybe she's supposed to be, but I'm going to give Blade Runner 7 gulps.
That was our Chaser review for Blade Runner.
And as always, if you like this review, please click like and or subscribe to Cinema Gulp today. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. Just go to Cinema Gulp.
This is John.
This is Ben. We drink your cinema.
I drink it up! Oh, Yoshime, they don't believe me, but you won't let those robots eat me, Yoshime. They don't believe me, but you